Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church live stream worship service. I am the Reverend William Levwood. My pronouns are he and him. And I am so happy to be joining you today as Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church's new minister. Accotink UU Church is a welcoming and inclusive community that seeks to create a more just and compassionate world through our actions to bring about justice and by honoring the web of nature of which we are a part. All are welcome here in this justice-seeking, earth-healing community of faith. You are welcome no matter whom you love, no matter your identity or heritage, no matter your beliefs or background, no matter your means or abilities, you are welcome here in this religious community. We also welcome the ancestors and descendants. We welcome the people who made each of us, the biological ancestors, spiritual ancestors, teachers and guides. We welcome those who imagined and made this congregation possible. We welcome the ancestral people of this land and recall that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing with the original people of this land, whose bodies and spirits live on in their descendants, many of whom are members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomeck Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing, so that all the descendants together shall one day know full justice. With this, let us welcome the longings and hopes of all the descendants, that we might live for them today. I now invite Nancy Melito, our worship associate this morning, to continue our welcome.
Good morning. If you are new to Accotink and would like to talk more about this church, please be sure to reach out to me, our minister, Reverend William, or one of today's greeters using the chat box. On our website, accotinkuu.org, you can check the online order of service in the worship section. While you are on the website, please be sure to check our events page for upcoming virtual gatherings and other news. I now invite you to close your other windows or apps and devices, take a deep breath, and center yourself for worship. We journey together through good times and bad, through the thick and the thin, the smooth and the rough. We journey together as a community committed to transformation, healing, and justice. We journey together because we know how intimately the fate of one is dependent on the fate of all. We journey together guided by the central tenets of our Unitarian Universalist heritage, of this free and liberating faith. We journey together open always to new learning, knowing that the revelations of the spirit, the insights of the mind, and the embrace of the heart are ever changing. Though the faces change, our hearts are one. Time marches on, but love is a constant presence across the ages. Though we suffer the flames of cruelty, the light also shines upon us, and the fire warms us. With the lighting of this chalice, in joy and friendship, may we continue journeying together toward wholeness as we build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community committed to accountably dismantling racism and oppressions of all kinds in ourselves and in our institutions. May it be so.
This morning's story is titled Light as a Feather, Heavy as a Stone. It's an adaptation of a Jewish folktale. It's a story about a bakery. It's a story about a bakery in an otherwise unremarkable place. Not exactly a big city, but not a small town either. Just kind of an in-between sort of place. People don't really know about it, except people do know about it because of this bakery. Because the baker there bakes the most amazing cakes and cookies and croissants, bakes the most amazing muffins and pies, brownies and biscuits and biscotti. So people come from miles around just to visit this bakery. And in this town, there was one little girl who loved that bakery so much that she came every single day. Now, one day when she came, even though chocolate chip cookies were her favorite, you might think about what your favorite is. My daughter always used to want me to put Rice Krispie treats into the story. And this baker did make the most amazing Rice Krispie treats, by the way. But on this particular day, the little girl wanted to get a blueberry muffin. So she went up to the counter, she got the blueberry muffin, and she went and sat down and she got ready to take the first delicious bite of the light, fluffy muffin. And she took the first bite and, ooh, was it bitter and heavy, heavy as a stone. Something must have gone awry that morning because the baker seemed to have left out the sugar. Now, for some reason, the little girl didn't say anything to the baker. She just wandered outside. But when she wandered outside, she saw some folks she knew. And when she saw these folks, she couldn't help herself. She was just dying to tell this story. And she went up to them and told them about the bitter blueberry muffin, heavy as a stone. And then she continued down the street. And as she continued down the street, she told more people. And as you can imagine, those people told people. And those people told people. And pretty soon, in just a matter of weeks, the story had spread far and wide. Soon, people stopped coming to the bakery. Now, the little girl, she kept going to the bakery every day. And a couple of weeks later, when she came in, the baker who had heard that the little girl was the one who had told the story about the blueberry muffins, so she motioned the girl over to her and she said, "You know, it's a sad thing. Because of this story, people have stopped coming, and I might have to close the bakery." Well, the girl was devastated. Remember, she loved that bakery like nobody else. She came there every day. So she said, "Is there anything I could do to help?" And the baker said, "I think there might be. Come to the bakery tomorrow afternoon and bring a pillow." So the next afternoon, the girl came with a pillow. They met right outside the bakery. The baker didn't say a word. She just handed the girl a pair of scissors. And somehow the little girl knew just what she was being asked to do, and she used the scissors to cut off the top of the pillow. It was a cool, blustery autumn day, so as soon as she did that, all the feathers that were in the pillow were taken up and spread, not only through the town, but over the tops of the trees, out far beyond where the girl could see. Now, at this point, the baker did speak. She said to the girl, "If you want to gather up the trouble that's been started by this story, you need to gather up all those feathers." Well, the girl said, "I couldn't possibly do that. They've scattered everywhere." But the baker just turned on her heels and went back into the bakery, leaving the girl in a daze. And in her daze, she kind of wandered down the street, picking up the few stray feathers that had fallen nearby. And as she was walking, she saw a small group of people, and they were talking actually about the bitter blueberry muffins, talking about how wonderful the bakery had been, But oh, did you hear about those bitter blueberry muffins? Heavy as a stone. Well, the girl interjected, asking if any of them had ever tasted the bitter blueberry muffins. And everyone admitted that they hadn't, that everything they had ever tasted from the bakery was marvelous. Well, the girl said, actually, I've tasted those bitter blueberry muffins. And she started to get carried away and to tell the story again. But right in the middle, she realized there was a different possibility, a different choice she could make. And she started to relate how she had continued to go to the bakery every day and how amazing and marvelous all the baked goods had been every day before and every day since. And she continued to tell that story over the next week or two. And as you can imagine, the people she told people. And those people told people. And pretty soon, the story had spread far and wide. So by the time the girl returned to the bakery, she was so busy spreading this new story, she hadn't gone to the bakery in about 2 weeks. So by the time she came in, she was met by the baker. And with a huge smile on her face, the baker motioned her over. And as soon as she got to her, the baker said, "You've done it. You've gathered all the feathers." And then, since she knew how much that little girl loved the bakery, she actually invited her to become her apprentice. And the girl learned how to bake all those delicious cookies and cakes and croissants, brownies and biscuits and biscotti, muffins and pies, and of course, Rice Krispie treats. Years later, when the baker retired, the girl became the new baker. And one morning, this little boy who loved coming to the bakery like nobody else, who came every single day, came in and ordered chocolate chip cookies. He sat down, he took the first bite. Woo! The overwhelming tang of salt smacked his taste buds. You see, the baker had put in tablespoons where the recipe called for teaspoons. And as the boy went out onto the street, the baker watched with a little twinkle in her eye. That's our story for today, but I want to say to both young and old that I've heard that those feathers are still out there in the world. So keep an eye out. And if you do find a feather, maybe that can be a reminder to do a kind deed for someone, to tell a new story, to bring some much needed healing into this world. Years ago, when I created the adaptation of the Jewish folk tale that was Our Time for All Ages, I developed it by telling it and retelling it to my daughter as a bedtime story. One night, she said to me, "Daddy, the bad part happens, but then the good part. And it keeps happening like that. Bad part, good part, bad part, good part. This is how life happens. Good part, bad part. Sometimes good part, bad part. Sometimes bad part, bad part, bad part, good part. We make mistakes. Others make mistakes. There are structures that push down upon us, scatter our energies, break apart our resolve. There's also a collective force of justice, wisdom, and caring that lifts us up, centers us, guides and heals us. And through it all, we journey together, through the ups and downs, the good parts and bad parts, journeying together toward wholeness. Psychologists Marshall Duke and Robin Favouche have studied how family narratives affect resilience. They've found 3 kinds of narratives. There can be a narrative of unending ascent. The world just keeps getting better and better. There can be a narrative of decline and descent. The world just keeps getting worse. But it's the 3rd kind of narrative, in which there are peaks and valleys, times of triumph and times of struggle, failures and the overcoming of failures. This third narrative, that good part, bad part, good part, this is the one that nurtures resilience.
Reading from Gather the Sparks by Howard Schwartz. Long before the sun cast a shadow, before the word was spoken that brought the heavens and the earth into being, a flame emerged from a single unseen point. And from the center of this flame, sparks of light sprang forth, concealed in shells that set sail everywhere, above and below, like a fleet of ships, each carrying its cargo of light. Somehow, no one knows why, the frail vessels broke open, split asunder, and all the sparks were scattered like sand, like seeds, like stars. That is why we were created, to search for the sparks, no matter where they have been hidden.
Several years ago, I was sitting at my kitchen table at the end of a long day of work when my then 4-year-old daughter came to me with a small jar of glitter. She handed me the jar and said, "Daddy, will you open this for me?" As I uncorked the jar and handed it back to her, I asked, "What do you want it for?" And she said, "I don't know, Daddy." And from there, things happened very quickly. She poured a little bit of the glitter into the palm of her hand. She took 2 steps and she glitter bombed our cat, our black cat. I said, "You really shouldn't have done that." And then I just sat there. I mean, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, felt like it could have been 10 minutes. I just sat there frozen, imagining finding glitter everywhere for months and months, finding it in the sock drawer, in my closet, all over the couch. I just sat there. I didn't know what to do. Finally, I got up from the table and went into the living room where my wife was doing some work on the computer, and I basically said, "Help! How can we clean up this glitter? Any ideas?" She suggested using wet wipes. Now, I didn't think that was going to work. Right away, I was like, but I kept that to myself. And actually, the wet wipes were very helpful for cleaning the floor where the cat had been standing. They worked beautifully for that, but they didn't work for getting glitter off the cat. Not even a little bit. So then I thought, let's try one of those cat brushes, you know, the one for combing their hair so it doesn't get everywhere and they like the feeling of it. I tried it, didn't help. Not even a little bit, none of that glitter was coming off. So I went into the living room and enlisted my wife's help again. We took soap and water into the bath. You can imagine how the cat liked that. Also, didn't work. Not at all. I mean, in that bathtub, no glitter, none. On the cat, plenty of glitter. So along the way, intermittently, as we cleaned the floor together, as I tried different ways to clean the glitter off the cat, I was talking to my daughter. I was trying to make this a teachable moment. I was trying to explain to her how she shouldn't have glitter bombed the cat and how she could have known that ahead of time. But not only that, how she could have known about other things in that category. But it wasn't working. I mean, it was hard to describe the category. It was hard to make it developmentally appropriate, and it just wasn't working. I wasn't making any headway. I just couldn't figure out how to explain what other things would be like glitter bombing the cat, and thus how she could know not to do those other things in the future. The one thing that did work was finally, out of exasperation, I said, next time, just ask Daddy first. This worked a little bit. That night, right away, she started asking before she would do anything. Daddy, can I have a banana? Yes, darling, you can have a banana. Daddy, can I have a sweet roll? Yes, you can have a sweet roll. But as soon as it was something that she thought I would probably say no to, I found her under the table, where she used to like to go when she was sneaking a piece of candy. I found her there under the table doing something she shouldn't be doing. The point is, it was completely not working. I was making no headway. I wasn't able to make it a teachable moment. And by the way, at some point, she came to me and she said to me, Daddy, do you remember how I told you that I didn't know what the glitter was for? Yeah, I remember. She said, Daddy, I did know. So what can we learn from this story? I think it's an amazing story, and probably you can learn a lot more from it than what I'm going to share with you this morning, but let's explore it a little bit. First of all, I believe that sometimes we are all still 4-year-olds. That there is a 4-year-old inside each of us who wants to do things we know we shouldn't do. Things we know we shouldn't do, but that we want to do anyway. That maybe says to ourselves, I don't know what I want that glitter for, when really we do know. It might be getting lost surfing Facebook. It could be making an excuse for why we deserve to eat something unhealthy, those brownies and cakes from the story earlier. It could even be something more serious, like a drug addiction. Whatever it is, we all glitter bomb sometimes. We all make impulsive decisions or get stuck in bad habits that we repeat over time. So it seems to me that there are two directions our learning can take. The first is how to avoid glitter bombing in the first place. How to keep the cork on the jar, as I should have done from the very beginning. The adult inside of us can choose to keep the cork on the jar. The 4-year-old can't do it, and the 4-year-old inside of us can't do it either. But sometimes the adult inside of us can keep the cork on the jar. I'll give you one example of that, what Tom Rath and Jim Harder, who work for Gallup polls, call a positive default. We can set positive defaults in our lives. For example, if we're tempted to eat fast food at lunchtime, as I often am, we can pack a healthy lunch the night before or the morning before. And that sets a positive default in place, so it's less likely we'll eat the fast food. Now, I think that glitter bombing happens also on the societal level. And on the societal level, wise policies can act like positive defaults. For example, domestic violence homicides are 500% less likely when gun control measures are put in place. And suicides are also drastically reduced when people don't have easy access to a firearm. And more broadly, research has been done on many societal issues, and we know what will reduce school shootings, what will reduce police violence, what experiments have been tried that effectively reduce homelessness or have lowered rates of heroin addiction. With some things, we do know how to keep the lid on the jar. So in those situations, all that's needed is to put these policies, these positive defaults in place. So that's the first direction of learning, keeping the lid on the jar. Whether it's in relation to our own bad habits or to destructive forces in the world. But that isn't the main lesson of this parable. The parable of the 4-year-old who glitter bombed her cats. I really should have named the sermon that. But that's not the point of this parable, because that's not what happens in the parable. I didn't keep the cork on the jar. And just as in the parable, we're going to glitter bomb sometimes. So what then? How do we respond after the 4-year-old glitter bombs the cat? So I'm going to share a habit I struggle with as an example, and I'm sure I'm the only person here today who struggles with this habit: getting distracted on the internet, right? Nobody else has that problem. Now, I know some things about what triggers this bad habit. I'm more likely to glitter bomb when I'm especially stressed, or when I'm overtired, or angry, or sad, or anxious. I know what triggers this bad habit, so sometimes I can catch myself ahead of time. There are positive defaults that I can put in place. But I'm going to be stressed, overtired, angry, sad. These things are going to happen sometimes. I know I'm going to glitter bomb sometimes. And as beautiful as glitter is in a black cat's fur, it really is beautiful, let me tell you. I don't recommend finding out, just take my word for it. Or look up at the stars in the night sky. As beautiful as that glitter is in a black cat's fur, it's also a big, huge mess. A big, huge mess that is nearly impossible to clean up. So what do we do when the parent inside of us falls asleep on the job, or is just tired after a long day at work, and the mischievous 4-year-old inside, hungry for attention, glitter bombs the cat? Our goal can't be to succeed all the time. So my suggestion is that we practice failing successfully. Now, failing successfully is an idea that I learned from contact improvisation teacher Nancy Stark Smith, who died in 2020. May her memory be for a blessing. Nancy taught that when you're learning to do a handstand, you're not going to kick your legs up beyond the center point until you know you can fail successfully. You're not going to do that because you're afraid of falling backwards and painfully slamming your back into the floor. And because of that, you're always going to undercorrect. You're always going to err on the side of not kicking your legs up quite high enough. And that means you're never going to learn to do a handstand, because to learn to do handstands, you have to be able to err in both directions. In order to learn how to do a handstand, you have to learn to fail successfully. That means learning how to kick your legs up past the center point and then cartwheel off to the side at the last moment so that you land safely on your feet. Once you learn that, then you can play back and forth between a little too much kicking of the legs, a little too little, until you find your balance. So we can apply this practice of failing successfully in our own lives. So I want to ask you to bring to mind a bad habit. Choose one that is more ingrained, one that you really have a hard time avoiding. Not one where it's easy to keep the cork on, one where you're likely to glitter bomb. And bring that bad habit to mind. And ask yourself, what would it look like for you to fail successfully? What would it look like with that bad habit for you to fail successfully? Now, I don't expect you to figure it out right now in this moment. I don't think I would be able to do that either. But take a little time, think about it. Every time I do this, I learn a little bit more about how to fail successfully. With the example I shared earlier about my habit of getting distracted on the computer, knowing that's going to happen sometimes, that I'm going to glitter bomb, I needed a way to fail successfully. So after quite a bit of experimentation, I've started to learn how to do that, how to fail successfully. For me, in that situation, failing successfully involves taking short distraction breaks on purpose when I'm at my best, when I'm not stressed or tired. And through that practice, by practicing getting distracted and then getting back on track when I'm at my best, I've learned how to cartwheel out of my failed handstand, and I'm better able to get out of it even when I'm distracted, even when I'm stressed or anxious or overtired. Now, glitter bombing also happens on a global scale. And the first example that comes to mind for me is climate change. As Bill McKibben pointed out in his 2010 book on climate change, yes, way back in 2010, that even then climate change had progressed much faster than scientists thought it would, had progressed so far, so fast, that even if we completely stopped all of our carbon emissions right now, the momentum of climate change that has already been set in motion is going to keep climate change happening. The cat has already been glitter bombed. It's a big, huge mess, and we can't clean it up, not perfectly. The coronavirus is another example, already a global pandemic, and now we have the Delta variant spreading like wildfire. The cork is already off the jar. The question before us is how to fail successfully, how to best mitigate risk, how to flatten the curve. And the same is true with other global problems like racism, sexism, economic inequality, homophobia, transphobia. The cat has already been glitter bombed. We aren't going to be able to fix these problems quickly and easily. Let's look at racism as an example. Even if we could just wave a magic wand and get rid of every racist person in the world, just like climate change, the momentum of racism, the systemic effects of racism are going to continue. So how are we going to fail successfully? What does it look like on the societal level to cartwheel out of that botched handstand? Now, at this point, I start to feel a bit hopeless. Anybody else starting to feel a bit hopeless? And you know what I want to do when I start to feel hopeless, right? I want to get distracted on the internet. I want to glitter bomb. So let's look at our parable again. And let's ask ourselves, what if humanity is just 4 years old? What if humanity is just 4 years old? When I think about it this way, when I think about humanity being just 4 years old, I'm filled with compassion and forgiveness for our mistakes. I'm filled with gentleness and love, and I just want to help us grow and develop, just like I want to help my daughter grow and develop. And I start to accept the ways we are not able to understand what causes our behavior or how to change it. Not yet. Just as I accept that in my 4-year-old daughter, and it starts to bring that hope back. Because I know that my daughter who is now 8 years old, who loves caring for that same now aging cat, I know my daughter is going to continue to grow and develop. And likewise, I know that humanity is going to continue to grow and develop. I trust that. And trusting that, I can focus not on why did this happen? Why is the world this way? Which is demoralizing. Instead, I can say to myself, now that the cat has been glitter bombed, how am I going to respond? How am I going to respond? Studies have shown that asking this question, how am I going to respond, rather than why did this happen, improves our ability to cope with the challenges in our lives and in our world. Now, I want to share one more story. In the 14th century, Rabbi Isaac Luria put forth a new story about the creation of the world. This story is what inspired the poem that was our reading. Rabbi Isaac Luria imagined that the creation of the world, the divine sent out vessels of light. But for some reason, no one knows why, these vessels couldn't contain the light and they shattered. And when they shattered, they sent shards of light everywhere. And those shards of light are hidden throughout the world, just like the feathers I mentioned earlier. And these sparks of light hidden throughout the world, it's our job as humanity to find these shards of light and lift them up. I think of them also like seeds encased in their seed shells that can grow. Now let's just for a moment, let's just notice what an amazing story this is. Rabbi Luria is basically saying that the creation of the world was done by a 4-year-old who just glitter bombed her cat. I just love that. Now, when I preach a sermon, I like to give a practical spiritual practice, some kind of a takeaway. And when I do that, I like to beta test it myself before sharing it with others. So I've been applying Rabbi Luria's teaching in my own life. I've been moving through my days, taking moments to ask, what would lifting up a spark of divinity or goodness look like in this moment? At first, I found it most easy to notice in difficult moments, in those moments when I feel a little off kilter, when an interaction with someone else isn't going quite right. And then I'm like, oh, hidden spark moment. Note to self, pay attention. And then I'm able to focus my attention on what it might look like to lift up the spark of divine light hiding in that difficult moment. And it's been really helpful. And the more I engage in the practice, the better I get at applying it, even in everyday humdrum moments, like when I'm putting my child to bed or discussing potential health insurance policies with my spouse. And that's part of Isaac Luria's method too, lifting up sparks, hiding not only in those difficult moments, but in everyday moments as well. So I want to offer that spiritual practice to you, to try moving through your day and ask yourself in any given moment, perhaps you start with the ones that aren't going so well, ask yourself, what can I do to transform this moment? What can I do to lift up a spark of goodness, holiness, sacredness in this moment? Now, I do want to offer a caution. With a practice like this, it's possible to think that we're supposed to do it all on our own. But sometimes lifting up the spark is going to be realizing when you're struggling with something difficult that you just can't shake, just can't get through on your own, realizing in that moment that to fail successfully means to reach out and ask for help, to ask a friend or a mentor for some support. And with some things, it's not going to be just a moment. It's not going to be just one moment with those big issues, climate change, racism, sexism, that kind of stuff. And also those difficult things in our own personal lives. It's not going to be just one moment. It's going to be a string of moments beaded together on a rosary. It's going to call for a long-term vision and commitment. The last thing I want to say is that ultimately, it's not about the glitter at all. It's about loving the 4-year-old. The worst thing I could have done in that moment, when that cat was glitter bombed, would have been to focus more on the glitter than on loving my daughter. And that isn't just true about loving my 4-year-old in that moment, it's true about large-scale systemic change as well. So what does it look like to love the 4-year-old of humanity in the face of racism and other oppressions in this time of rising authoritarianism, as the climate crisis gets worse faster than it's getting better? It isn't about some idealized utopia where we as individuals or as a global community never make any mistakes ever again. I think it's about asking ourselves, what does it look like to fail successfully? It's about trading the expectation that we should always get it right for the realization that mistakes are how we learn and grow. The realization that if we're going to learn how to do a handstand, we have to learn how to cartwheel safely out of a failed handstand. That failing successfully is integral to our ability to learn and grow. So I invite you in the coming days and weeks and months and years as we string together a rosary to love the 4-year-old within yourself, especially when you glitter bomb, to look for learning in that moment, to love the 4-year-old you meet in others, especially when they glitter bomb, to look for the learning in that moment, and to love the 4-year-old of humanity, even as humanity glitter bombs, to practice finding and lifting up the sparks, and to keep loving ourselves and each other through it all. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Though we extinguish our chalice flame, we carry within us what we kindled, the light of inspiration, the warmth of compassion, the fire of commitment. May we bring these gifts into our lives and share them radiantly out into the world. And now, I invite you to join me in our community blessing with the words of David Bumbaugh. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness to that unity.
Let us remember that a resilient narrative is an oscillating narrative, one that includes peaks and valleys, times of triumph and times of struggle, failure and learning from failure. It isn't about whether we're going to glitter bomb or not glitter bomb. It's about how we choose to respond. So may we choose to fail successfully again and again, loving the 4-year-olds within and without as we learn and grow together.